iCloud. Great, cool. Well, thank you guys for coming. Some new faces, some people who have joined in the past, so thank you to everybody. It looks like we have a couple questions that people have sent me for the agenda today, and I have a topic as well. But before all of that, just a quick introduction. My name is Angela. I'm head of design at Flexpa, and I started Design Rounds back in March as a way to connect with other designers in the healthcare industry, just because it's obviously so complex. Everyone here probably knows that very intimately, but intimately from like a different angle. So I find that chatting with each other, just understanding the nuances of like the particular area that you work in is really great and really helpful. And the other goal of Design Rounds is also to be a space for us to bring designs and crit and have a chance to like get everyone else's opinion on like tangibly the work that we're doing. So I don't believe we have anything to crit today, unless anyone wants to volunteer last minute, which is totally cool. But we do have a couple questions. We can go with that. We have found it to be easier for everyone to do like the little raise hand feature in Zoom, because Zoom like auto orders you after you raise your hand, and then we don't get the awkward like mute unmute who's talking kind of a scenario. So let's go ahead and use that just for ease. I think JJ has some AV issues, but for everyone else, if you're able to keep your camera on, I think it's just a little bit more interactive that way. So to the extent that you can. Hey Elena, how you doing? That'd be great. Thank you. Okay, let's get started then. We only have 9 people, so maybe we could do intros in case people are interested in, what sector of healthcare everyone comes from. So we can popcorn around, do quick intros to help speed it up. Why don't we just do everybody? Can you all raise your hand? And Zoom will order all of us. So that's a little bit easier that way, I think. Perfect. Woo, yay. All right. Well, my intro is pretty short, but I'm Angela. I'm head of design at Flexpa, also the only designer, which was a big impetus for why I wanted to start Design Rounds. Prior to Flexpa, I've been at Flexpa for about a year. Prior to Flexpa, my healthcare experience was 3 years at Oscar, which is a insurtech, health tech company based in New York, but have pretty good coverage now, I think. So that was my entrance. A lot of my family happens to be in healthcare, so it kind of floats around the family quite a bit. But excited to meet you guys there too. Caitlin, feel free to jump in there. I think Zoom does like, we can go like top left. Top left is the next speaker.
Got it. So my background's actually in urban planning and instructional design, and I'm the lead UX researcher at a company that basically makes the EHR equivalent for social services. But we've also been designing community-based programs to engage community health workers. So I've actually been learning a lot and kind of helping facilitate a lot of the program design, which has been a lot of fun. So glad to be here. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Pranati. I'm a product designer at a stealth health tech startup based in San Francisco. And we build tech for low-income families on Medicaid. Also the only designer at my company. So awesome to be here. Super helpful to be in these types of discussions. Yeah, excited to chat. Good to meet you all.
Hey everyone, I'm Gabe. I was previously at Allscripts. Now it's called Veridime. Back in February, I was there for around almost 2 years. Unfortunately, I went through some layoffs, but I was also the only designer on this EHR, specifically like the ambulatory side, so small to medium-sized clinics like pediatricians, family medicine, and geriatrics. Very interesting stuff in healthcare, and I think it's nice to have a community to kind of talk about design and healthcare in the same space. So glad to be here.
Elena, you're up.
Sorry. Hi, friends. My name is Elena. I am a product designer at Flatiron Health. I've been there for a little under 2 years. I'm very sorry about the siren. I'm pretty sure that's just a cop trying to skip the light. Previous to Flatiron, I had no background in healthcare design. I was in fintech. So I'm about 2 years in now, and probably many more to come.
Right. Hi, everybody. I'm JJ. I work for Unite Us. We are a social determinants of health company that integrates with EHRs at hospital systems and clinics and facilitates referrals out to community-based organizations to treat the whole person. I also am kind of relatively new to this space. Previously, I was also in fintech, working in the credit union space. I manage a team of UX researchers and UX designers to design our products. And we're happy to be here. And this is not my first time at Design Rounds. And thanks, Angela, for keeping these on the books. Good stuff.
Hi, I think I'm next. I'm Sonia and I am first timer here. I have an interesting background. I'm a healthcare provider who used to be a network provider, and I decided to go the UX route. I invested in UX education. I actually got continuing education as part of my renewals for my credentials. And I've been doing UX since 2019. I worked on COVID projects with CVS Health during COVID, and that was interesting. And since then, I've been working more in accessibility design as well as inclusion. So I'm very much a fan of assistive tech and including that in our workflows. So I'm happy to talk more about that today. I'm currently working with a group called Sunflower UX in Austin, Texas, and we are doing a lot of patient provider continuing education. I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. And for those of you who are UX designers of one, I understand where you're coming from. So my heart goes out to you.
Sweet. Thank you, everyone. We do have a list of questions, but I did see some like nods and interest and eyebrow raises during everyone's intro. So does anyone like have a question for somebody else or want to start with the topic before we dive into the pre-listed ones?
I do, if it's okay.
Of course.
Okay, so my question is, how are you building accessibility into your programs? Like if you're like able to do like an accessibility sprint ahead of time, if it's more like a day zero consideration, or if you're just like having to fix things at the very end of the process. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
So I will just add, I'm not in charge of it, but my colleague Chris, who I just asked if he could jump on with us, he just has put together, he's creating the framework for a design system that we're trying to get launched and creating an accessibility guide that ideally will inform all of it as a kind of a start to like a broader inclusive design effort. But he's being incredibly deliberate and taking a lot of time to get engineering support, which is way more of a pain in the ass than it should be, in my humble opinion. But like somebody deliberately taking it on and really making the business case and like brand case for it seems to have been how it's working at our organization, which is very engineering minded and like not super design oriented.
Yeah, I'll echo that. Luckily we have a very strong lead designer who takes care of our design system, and so as components are built out, we have a vetting process to make sure that all of our components that we build out are inherently accessible. We also build accessibility benchmarks and goals into our product performance OKRs. So it's just sort of, we've baked it into our approach, and we work with a third party accessibility consulting firm that audits our platform, does automated audits every 5 days, does manual audits every annually, and they give us reports on how we're doing, and through them we also provide direct training to our content creators, our designers, our researchers, and our development team.
Thank you for sharing that. I just want to throw this out as a give. I am a person with a disability. So if you ever need someone to take a look at something from the dyslexia perspective, I work a lot on picking up where there's problems like with voice input as opposed to just type input, because we've got people out there that need to have both. And then what I'm finding is a lot of the designs, they're being developed with a sighted user experience in mind. And then we wonder why people are not responding to surveys and other ways of inputs, because a lot of times people will need those alternative inputs. And so just as a consideration, I'm happy to look at things for you with that accessibility mindset.
Awesome. Thank you for asking that question, Sonia. I think this is actually quite related to some of the design system work. Someone asked, Alex asked, I don't know if Alex will be able to join today, but he had added a question here that says, what is a common interaction experience in healthcare that could be standardized or at least identified as a best practice within healthcare? For example, insurance verification, appointment booking, reimbursements, etc. So sort of taking design system like one step further and just saying like, what are standard interactions that could be standardized? And I can pop the question in the chat here, just so you can see it. Hey, Chris, nice to have you, and thank you, Caitlin, for adding Chris.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Well, we were actually just talking about maybe pause the question I was just asking, but Caitlin, I think you added Chris because he works on a lot of the accessibility parts of the design system, right? So is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I just started to kind of sell it to our organization through kind of our style guide, which ultimately kind of move into our component library and then move into our design system. And so yeah, it's really interesting kind of space to kind of sell or to try to bring accessibility out from the design system instead of kind of like getting like complete buy-in across the whole company. And that's kind of, I think, is going to be our approach, and hopefully it'll work.
Yeah, that's really interesting. What has been like an expected roadblock, hurdle, road bump, whatever you will, and what has been like an unexpected one, and how are you guys handling it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think when you talk design systems or components or component libraries, I think engineering kind of thinks like, oh, we're going to do all of that at once, or leadership thinks like, we're going to spend a year and then we're finally going to see the output of this thing. So I knew that was going to be kind of an output that would, because I've done this at another company too, where you're trying to sell the design system. And so, approaching it, I think from an accessibility standpoint, I think an outcome that has been kind of a surprise is that like you seem to get a lot more buy-in, not necessarily from engineering, but like from senior leadership or the larger company, especially since we're working in healthcare and social care. I think that was a little unexpected how excited the company was when we brought in the kind of accessibility piece, because everyone can see the value of making your products accessible to everyone. So yeah.
I would say the unexpected roadblock has been engineering, at least at our company. They are not super interested in front end design. And so you would sort of think like, oh, if we, like train a little bit for the 5K, like it'll just make everyday work a lot easier all the time. And they just are not like, they're not that, we're making them be interested, by the way Chris explained it, but like they're not inherently that interested, which I find really surprising.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question for Chris and Caitlin. Are you kind of advocating and selling this design system through like workshops or any like side meetings that you have engineers come to, like, oh hey, this is our presentation, this is why design system is important, blah blah blah. I wonder how because I had trouble doing that too, and as a lone designer, I was trying to do workshops and trying to do presentations, but attendance was low and people didn't want to come during the lunchtime. So just curious how you guys are able to advocate for that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I learned a lot from the last design system that I sold. And so when I came to this organization, I knew that the previous designer had tried to get it going here as well. And I kind of met with her, and then I basically did like user interviews throughout the company, from like product to engineering to, I don't know, we must have done about 6 of them. And so we could kind of figure out like, why can't we get this going? Like, what are the problems? Like, and engineering has just kind of like, we don't have the time. Like, they think it's going to be this huge time suck. So what kind of came out of that was like, I put together an internal team. I just went out and did it. Me and the previous designer, we just like, let's put in a little, like, I guess they call it like a federated team. And I grabbed a person from QA and 2 engineers and 2 designers and 1 person from product. And then we just set up like a 2-week cadence on the meeting. And I still have that group going. I kind of restarted it again. And now the group is a little bit more focused, and they're kind of like a little bit more bought in. And there's 2 other engineers that we have that are excited by the work, which we didn't have in the beginning. So I think that's, I guess what I keep trying to like sell it from the bottom up, instead of like going like right to the CEO and saying, oh, like we need this thing and it's going to save us money. Does that help?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much.
Sure.
That's awesome to hear. Oh, yeah, Sonia.
I'm sorry, can I ask one follow-up question? I'm also wondering, because a lot of times our companies have an employee resource group or some sort of advocacy group for people who have disabilities, and I'm wondering if you've worked with them to test things. I did that a lot in wellness programs, and it seems like I got a lot of buy-in internally when I worked with people who were trying to like also be part of the co-design or co-creation process.
Our company's pretty small. I think there's like 60 people, so we don't actually have what you described. We did do some surveys, like Poly through Slack and stuff like that. I did a couple workshops, like kind of persona building workshops that we invited people who are not on product or design at all. They're like in implementations or program or clinical or whatever. So I think we did what we could, but that sounds like an awesome resource and approach.
Yeah, I mean, I think we would love to have that in our organization.
I'm just saying, I think it's great to leverage where you can. And sometimes, you know, like we've built up panels, right? So panels of people, worked with third parties, partnered with community-based organizations, right? For a lot of the work. Somebody mentioned social determinants of health. Really important to do that community participation, you know, for those kinds of things. So like we have a school for the blind and the deaf here in Austin that is primed and ready for partnerships, right? So so those are some other things that might help. And then I also find for buy-in that if you can record people having difficulties in research and they're okay with that, and showing that to leadership is also a very important thing, because even like designers that have never used a screen reader, you know, in a workshop, like showing how difficult that process is. So if you can't figure it out, you know, how are we supposed to build it into our designs, right? So I just find a lot of those strategies to be helpful. And again, I'm happy to jump on another Zoom at some point and talk more about it. I'll just make myself available to the group because that is something that I work with all the time.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I can share out because I believe I have everyone's email addresses. So maybe Sonia and Caitlin, I can connect you guys. Or Sonia, what's like your preferred method of connecting?
Thank you for asking that question. If you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, once we're connected on LinkedIn, we can send voice memos. We can also like just go ahead and like do like a right in the moment Zoom. You know, we don't need to go back and forth with the email with lots of typing, because typing is the antithesis of my work style. So yeah, so that's the best way to do it. So you can just find me on LinkedIn.
And sorry, what's your last name?
Caitlin, I'm gonna drop Sonia's.
Oh, okay, thank you.
LinkedIn here. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, thank you for that. I really appreciate the question too.
Yeah, of course. It was when Sonia and I first got connected, I misunderstood what she meant and continued to write her back long essays via LinkedIn, which obviously were very difficult. So, but then I learned that LinkedIn Mobile has the voice feature, which I didn't realize, and we talked a little bit about why that's not on web. But yes, on mobile only right now. Cool. Okay. If we're feeling good, oh, thank you for sharing a resource, Chris. The next question that was kind of interesting and related to design systems and components and reusing patterns is the one I dropped into Zoom here, which is, I'll just reiterate real quick, what are common interactions and experiences in healthcare that could be standardized or maybe could benefit from being standardized? And would also be curious if anyone feels like they shouldn't be standardized.
The resource that I dropped in there, I actually came across this week in the Better platform, which is like this like digital health platform. They have just this article on like building a design system within healthcare, but clinical forms is something that they've standardized in their design system, which I thought was really interesting because I've never seen just in regular design systems like you know, form elements have been kind of standardized, but like as we all know here working in healthcare, like forms are like, as designers, they're like, you know, 80% of your job is designing these forms. So I thought that was really interesting, that there was kind of this piece of their better design system, the better design system they have that was just totally dedicated to clinical forms.
Oh yeah, this is really cool. I also like that a lot of like healthcare design systems that I see are kind of how to say like the UX might be good, but the UI is not that great. better actually looks like I'd want to engage with it. This is really nice. Thanks for sharing that. This is really cool, especially all the like under the header clinical data visualization system, like all the blood off stuff, respiratory rate, like that's nice.
That's cool too. Yeah, I like how they standardize that.
Is this like a open source project, or are they just saying here's how we design it?
I think they're just talking about like their design system. And I think there might be like a video at the end where they talk that I think the lead designer on the system kind of talks a little bit more about it.
Yeah, this looks, I think maybe both Pranathi and Gabe might be interested. It looks like this, it looks like an EHR. It looks like a lot of these things are like an EHR. Yeah, Elena.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing this article. This looks a lot sexier than the EHR that I design. I think that like the question of like standardization is a really interesting one, right? And I think it also depends on who you're designing for. So in my case, I'm designing specifically for healthcare providers, in this case, oncology. And I think one thing that we are thinking really hard about is when you're surfacing like an alert to a provider that has something to do with patient safety, is that like that's one thing that should be really, really easy to recognize no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing. I don't know if this is like specifically an interaction or if this is maybe just more a pattern that I'm speaking to, but when I think of patterns that should be standardized across maybe EHRs or healthcare products, especially when it comes to issues of patient safety, I could see something like alerting to particular levels of severity. So in our case, for example, like if you're doing interaction checking for a drug, for example, like you're trying to make sure that the drug that you're prescribing does not conflict with any of the drugs that the patient is currently on. And you sort of have to step through this process of like doing your due diligence and making sure, and you know, the technology can help you by saying, hey, we found this interaction. We think that this is a severity level 3 out of 5. You as the provider now get to sort of make your medical determination out of that. But I think that kind of interaction and that kind of pattern where you're thinking about risk to patient and a scale of severity of risk to patient, which may be relative to different fields within medicine. But I think like the idea of being able to alert a provider or alert someone that there is a risk to a patient, that I think is something that you should be able to walk from one EHR to another and be able to pick up on that immediately.
I just want to piggyback off what Elena said. It's interesting because I'm also building an EHR, and part of what I'm building includes like a medication interaction checker. And one of the struggles with that was, how do I design it in a way that's like compliant with how like other interaction checkers are, and like making sure that, yeah, we're like communicating the right level of severity and like what needs to be done like once an interaction is identified, our EHR versus like another one. I think maybe one thing to think about is designing experiences that are standardized across like the healthcare worker type. Like I feel like doctors have a certain workflow, like nurses have a certain workflow. Yeah, I don't know if that's like the right answer, but I think, yeah, like they're so used to like a way of working, like making sure that all EHRs kind of like match that, so they know what they have to do like when they receive a piece of information. Yeah, also this resource is really cool. I'm like reading through it right now. So thanks for sharing that, Chris.
Okay, I think I'm next. This is Sonia again. One thing that I found very challenging when I worked as a healthcare provider, so I'm gonna like put my healthcare provider hat on for just a second, is that a lot of times the information again was not voice prompted. So I noticed here on the form fields, I'm seeing like tooltips and some other fun things, which help, right, because they give context, and if they stay there, when it doesn't disappear, like when you're putting the inputs in, because people who work in the field also have disabilities. So I just think it's something that, it's very helpful to think about. But also I had patients that were coming in that they were trying to fill out their information in the forms ahead of time. And there were some challenges with like electronic health record, like putting in your provider and giving permissions and consent forms and those kinds of experiences too. So I'm kind of wondering if there's like a twofold here that could be very helpful. The other thing that I was going to say is if we could maybe test some of these things, because one thing we're working on right now in Sunflower is inclusion principles. A doctor in Mississippi may not have gender options for their patients. So like little things like that can make the patient experience better and might actually make them want to come back again and show up for an appointment. I think that those kinds of elements, if they're standardized and then they have to be changed out or deleted. So the standardization process for things like that for inclusion in healthcare would be a nice addition for an experience that somebody might actually feel welcome.
This isn't really standardizing an interaction either per se, but I was looking at this website for a new ICRA company, and one of their value props is no more complicated jargon. And if anyone's been to a past design rounds, you probably heard me rant about this because it's really irritating to me, which is like standardizing terminology, essentially. Like if Gravy, the company is called Gravy. I hope nobody knows I hope nobody at Gravy listens to this. But it's just like, it's great to reduce the complex jargon because that is important. But I think there's a lot of detriment in like your little silo changing terminology or using less complex terminology. But then the patient inevitably like interacts with other parts of the healthcare system that are using that terminology. And now you don't know how to connect those things. I definitely struggle with that a lot at Flexpa as well, because a core part of our product is asking patients to connect their health insurance portals. And health insurance is like, it's called health insurance, it's called health plan, it's called payer. But patients mix that up with like your provider or your healthcare organization rather than your healthcare insurance. Like there's so many parties. And the terminology is so different, and everybody has a portal now that shows kind of similar information. So it's really hard to get the patient to log into the thing that we need them to log into, which is the name on your insurance card, that portal. And even that's not straightforward, but I won't get into that. My ask though, what is, has anyone seen or created a good resource for like terminology in healthcare? Like either something we can use internally or something we can point patients to that's like, when we say health plan, it means this. When we say health insurance, it means this. When we say provider, it means this. And then, you know, all the other stuff like deductible, MOOP, whatever, all that good stuff. Has anyone seen a good resource like that? Maybe it's time to make one. Okay. Cool. Okay. Maybe I just got to internally do one.
To piggyback off that, Angela, we had multiple different products, and X didn't mean X, and like there was so many different terms. So for example, we had a product for the front office for the billing and a separate product for the doctors and nurses, the EHR. And you know, it wasn't apples to apples. So both user sets were kind of getting confused, and designing for that was very confusing. But maybe that's just like it comes from product to product or company to company. The product that I was working on at Allscripts was just everything's kind of backwards, and then just kept it the same way for so long. For like, this is like a 25-year-old product, and I think there's a double-edged sword with that, because the users who've been there for a while, say for example, our front office manager has been there for 20 years, likes the way her things are and likes the way you know, her system is, and if you change that, they kind of get upset. And I'm sure we've all experienced that before. And kind of to piggyback on the drug interactions topic too. I was working on a project where we had a regulatory requirement to show alerts. But on the other side of that, I was interviewing some doctors and pediatricians saying that they hated these alerts because there's so many of them and they got a lot of alert fatigue. So it was trying to find the fine balance to like creatively find a way to show on the screen that there's a drug alert here that you should pay attention to. This is very urgent, especially, I think our user base was, we were looking at pregnant patients. There's like lactation alerts specifically. And so it was really, really challenging to kind of find the balance between, okay, we need to alert these physicians, but at the same time, like they just click X right away and kind of get to their desired flow and kind of just ignore it almost. So it's kind of very, very challenging to say the least.
Yeah, I agree with like the alert fatigue, especially when it comes specifically to interaction checking. I think one thing that I find really interesting is when you talk to providers versus when you talk to healthcare administrators, you get very different you get very different answers about how many alerts should be in the EHR. The healthcare administrators are really interested in making sure that there are lots of alerts so that nobody misses anything. And the providers are like, get that out of my face, please, right now. I think like one thing that's really interesting about terminology is like, again, there's like something of a translation layer in between sort of like the clinical side and like the patient side, right? And I think that there's a lot of different language and a lot of different ways that you can make things more accessible to patients beyond providing different opportunities for ingestion, whether that is verbal or written, or using icons that are more sort of like widely recognized to represent something or the other, right? Because we all know that as soon as like you start to get too fancy with icons, like I don't know if anybody's seen the inside of a Prius, it's just icons everywhere and there's no legend. Like I have no idea what the icons mean. I just have to push buttons. But I think that like I don't want to say I have very little hope for creating a standard list that goes across. I think there are some terms and words that like we can create a layer of translation for that is more standardized. But one thing I'm thinking about is like in genomic testing, there are like all of these terms that you might use to refer to a particular gene or particular expression of a gene. And there's like one standardized list that it would make a lot of sense for everybody to use, but somehow still not everybody uses them, and folks find different use cases for being able to create their own language around some of these things. So I wonder if there's sort of like a way to have like, here's some terms we can all agree on, and everything else, it's like, just make sure that it's clear how you're translating that from the clinical side to the patient side, for example.
I apologize that I missed a little bit of the original question, Angela, but when I first got to this company, I was working with this amazing UX designer whose background had been in industrial design, Rose, and we basically started every project. It was, at that point, it was less about consolidating language on behalf of like the clients or the CHNs, but it was more between development and engineers and everyone else. And I'm sure there are doodles of me being psycho about language, but I really just kind of demanded, like, we are not an engineering company first, we are a clinical organization first, and I know there's going to be some lift, but we have to spend a little time at the beginning being really careful and precise about the words we use, and then kind of, I hate to use the word policing, but like a little bit holding people accountable, because there is just, with language, there's inherently so many opportunities for miscommunication that I think it's really important to be a little rigid once you've found something that works pretty well for everyone. So, oops.
Yeah, that Yes, agree with that very much. Our team at Flexpa, I'm very thankful for this, is fairly strict about that. Right now we're very small, we're 9 people, so it's easy to be
Oh.
strict about it. But what's cool, that one thing that we do is like everything that we want written on the front end to patients, so like all the copy that we have, is the exact same terminology as what the name of that column is in our database. So like anything that comes out as a variable is named the exact same. Well, I won't say exact. Someone at Flexpa is gonna yell, be like, that's not true. But like very, very close. To the point where like we had decided to rename something a little bit ago and went through the whole like migration process to change all the names, all the places in which this name appears, but also change the whole database name, which is like a pretty big migration, right? It's not like a trivial thing. So by doing that, we ensure that like, because when you're in code all day, you speak the language of code, and that's how the concepts register for you. When we look in Figma all day and we see these words, that's like how it registers to us, and it's no one's fault for like, oh, I meant to say, but you know what I mean. So to make sure like the words that we see in our roles and responsibilities every single day are what we want them to be, have been really helpful. So no one's like, oh, did you check if the organization's up? And you're like, and someone else interprets organization as like this parent body. Oh, who was it? That reminded me. Someone from a past design rounds was like, we have this concept called, I'm making up an example now, but like they're like, we have a concept called insurance card. And what it actually means is like your member profile, but insurance card is called like yeah, because they already had that concept. So they had to use another concept. I don't even think it was insurance. I think it was at their previous job. Oh, it was, oh no, maybe this was internal. Now I'm on a rant, but a ticket. Okay, I remember now. It was a ticket wasn't really a ticket. A ticket was an order, and a ticket could be like, it could be an event or it could be a product, but it was called a ticket, and there could be multiple orders in a ticket. I don't know. It's just like, how do you function in an organization when the terminology is like that?
That's a pretty cool approach to have the database match what is displayed. That's really, I'm gonna bring that up here. Right now, we're working on with our design system. We're tying our Figma components to our development component library, and we're aligning the names between those two things. So when we tell a developer, "Hey, use this component," it's named the exact same thing in their library, which has been a harder road than expected, but at least they're open to it, which is great. One thing that we did was we actually did a bunch of user research on our platform, and we said we just asked users. We showed them functionality and said, "What would you call this?" So whether it was the name of a feature, we wanted to name something that would make sense to them and resonate with them. Or if we're talking about paradigms within our platform, we did the same thing. Like, would you call this a program? Would you call this a service? Would you call this, what have you? And it was really enlightening because, things that we kind of took for granted because we're in it all day, some names just didn't make sense. And so we've been driving that effort with user research, which has been really, at times surprising, but always really fulfilling because you kind of feel like you're doing the right thing when you're having the conversations with people who might have named these things at the dawn of the company and telling them, well, actually our users want it a different way. It has led to some very, very interesting conversations here. Yeah.
Sonia, I actually had I had a different question. So if you wanted to respond, you should go first.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. And I think, on our side of things, right, like as the designers and as the team members, I think that's right on, like calling things the same, in columns and what have you. But I wonder also, we think about usability, like it's about this month that we're going to have the usability celebrations, right? So like, I'm wondering, just like they have Wear Red Day, all this kind of stuff. I wonder if there are some chances for us to sprinkle some of this kind of, it's really important for us to get the language right from the patient who's the consumer of our services, where we really start to kind of like plant the seed for, the importance of using the language of the consumer and doing more of that type of research. Because again, I call myself a healthcare provider, but somebody else may totally have a different a different way that they say that. And then I'm also a dietitian and a health educator. So I have two completely different types of things that I'm looking for. If I'm looking in a patient record, if I'm looking at a doctor's chart, if I'm talking to an insurance company and trying to get services approved, so it's almost like there's a language that starts from the consumer, and then it may have like, and may also be called these things, right? That's part of usability, because we can make great, accessible, beautiful products that nobody uses. And we can break experiences when we change words. So I'm kind of wondering if there's also like a process flow that this group might be able to kind of think through, so that we all have that we can use and replicate and start to get social buy-in or social proof around, and then give back to the profession, present at conferences and all that kind of stuff. I think there is another force that we have behind us, the patients. So
pro banding together. I feel like in the healthcare industry, that is certainly like a way to make some noise, I guess, so that people take, a certain thing more seriously. The question that I had is, like, we're talking about design systems, standardizing components, standardizing terminology. There are some like open source systems out there that people can use. Like, with standardization comes, and maybe this is an assumption, but with standardization comes like a little bit less opportunity for creativity, right? Like, because the point of being standard is you don't then go and make a whole different alert or a whole different form. How do you think that affects, like, as designers, we might be both motivated by, but also maybe measured by, like, interesting new design. Maybe that's just on the UI side. Maybe like what it's moving towards, just like thinking through problem flows and not necessarily like, is this input significantly different than inputs I've seen elsewhere? I don't have like a particular direction of perspective, but kind of just like posing that and seeing what you guys think.
I hear that. I definitely hear that. I think like in my case, like, this is sort of definitely a push and pull, right? Of like not reinventing the wheel, but also like leaving the door open to say like, maybe there's a rounder wheel that we can make, or a better wheel that we can make, right? I think that as a designer, I feel that sometimes I do have to check myself and say that, like, even though this thing excites me, it's not necessarily what's best for the user. And if it is best for the user, I'm going to be able to make a case for it. And unless I can make that case, then I'm going to use the patterns that exist. I think one of the hard parts about that is, where do you stop your sort of investigation, right? Because you could keep going and eventually find that case, right? But I think you sort of have to like time box yourself, or sort of like say, I'm only going to go as far as, and I don't think that that's a perfect solution. But it's like, you don't want to be the perfect is the enemy of the good, but also if like, at least in the case of like the EHR I designed for, if we never pushed for different patterns, like there's some stuff that is still solidly stuck in the 90s. You know what I mean? So I think there's like an element of pick your battles, and then there's an element of can you make the case? And then trying to prioritize from there.
We have so much to do. We have so many places where we could make what we're doing better that it's hard to even imagine. Like the idea that we could just standardize stuff to move on to another problem is amazing. And I don't mean the following to sound cheeky, but I write these little kind of art books on the side. So that's where I do my super creativity, like that kind of stuff. And then it makes it feel like structure at work that helps us move things forward is more like just generally acceptable in my life, because it's not the sole source of like kind of finding creative joy.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Caitlin. Having that kind of outside creative piece. I did take a class with, do you guys know Brad Frost? Works like on design systems, and it's kind of like a superstar in design systems. But I did ask him about these like kind of like one-offs or things that like aren't in your design system, or things that come up that don't need to be kind of standardized. And he calls them snowflakes. And I can send you guys like a like an article on that. And I think that's interesting because like you can't standardize every single little piece of your application, and then like you said, in the future not be able to have it be flexible to like whatever new, there might be some sort of like new UI pattern that comes out in 2024 that like would be amazing in your EHR or whatever it is, and you're not just going to say like, oh, it's not on the design system, so we're not going to use it. Like maybe it becomes one of these snowflakes that's like just used sparingly, and we don't need to make it into a component. And I think a lot of times engineers and other people are working on the product have a hard time with that. They're like, well, wait, we want to standardize every single thing, but it's like, that's, as we know, like that's just not how these things are built. Like there's always going to be a question or some better way we can do it, and it's not so black and white, I guess. So I'll send that article over.
Yeah, please do. I love that push. The analogy reminds me of, I was like, both cell phones and cars have sort of, converged on a very specific design, like the very smooth, white, pearly soap bar car. And obviously iPhones and, Android still has a little variation, but that's not to say like differentiation, if it's needed, can also unlock like certain undiscovered like benefits or improvements, which is cool. Okay, I now have 1 minute to prepare for this next meeting, but this was such a good discussion that I didn't want to stop it, and I'll figure out a way in this meeting. But thank you guys all so much for coming and being engaged and having this conversation. This is what's great about Design Round, so I really appreciate your attendance and also your contribution. And Chris, thanks for joining last minute.
Yeah, how
Thanks
often
for
do these happen?
organizing.
Yeah.
Of course.
Sorry, this is my first time.
No, glad to have you. They happen once a month on the first Thursday of the month.
And is this
Cool.
always the link?
This is always the link. This is
Nice.
always the link. If you signed up through Eventbrite, the Eventbrite event naturally has all the link and information in it as well.
Hey, can I say something real quick before I leave? I did include a jobs to be done resource, which is another, if anybody has not looked at that before, I feel like that sometimes is another good framework that kind of bridges between the customer experience or the patient experience and what we're doing too. So
thank you for sharing that. And I will, I try to be good about writing like the Substack notes after this. I'm not very good at it all the time, but I'll include all the links and send that out. So thanks all.
Thanks so
thank
much.
you.
Bye.
Thanks. Good.
Bye.
Good to meet you guys.
Bye.